Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. We have a few things to talk about. We'll start, as usual, with our pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
So we're going to talk for a minute about the 0-6 Jets, but not about anything on the field. Actually, the thought hit me about 2 weeks ago, and I am sure Jet fans aren't thinking about this possibility, and this is where the organization could be doing themselves irreparable harm. What if Trevor Lawrence decides to stay in school and the Jets have set this whole thing up, the tank, all these things, their players aren't developing, all of these things, and this kid says, you know what? I don't want to play for this team because they're not any good. I'm going to stay out of the controversy. I'm going to go to grad school instead, and I'll get drafted next year. He could do that. And then this would be the worst offseason the Jets have ever had to match the worst team the Jets have ever fielded. So this is the part of, the tank that you have to wonder if it got too far out of control. Well, right now, they're completely dysfunctional. Any team that tanks is fine, but you also have to still produce a little bit on the field so your team can get better. I pointed out the 96 Jets had 28 offensive touchdowns, and in a 1-15 season, which now seems like a dream for this team, and this team has 6 offensive touchdowns. They're not going to get to 28.
Well, who did that before? Was it Peyton Manning?
Manning did it, but so Manning didn't come out. Part of the rumor or supposition is if Parcells had guaranteed him he would be the number 1 pick, Manning would have come out. Parcells, for some inexplicable reason, wouldn't make that official guarantee to him, and Manning decided to stay in school. Right? That's been the whole story. That's been the underlying story when it comes to them now. Lawrence technically is only going to be a junior, which means he still can stay another year anyway.
Grad school thing. Yeah.
He can stay anyway. He's not necessarily forced to come out because he's got another year of eligibility if he wants to stay in school. And given the way our team is going right now, I wouldn't necessarily want to play for this franchise either.
So it is a chance, and I just want to point that out, that chance exists, and then if that happens, that changes a lot. That's
so 3 years ago it was suck for Sam, and they didn't. And then they traded up and didn't give up. They gave up a decent amount, but not a lot to move up to get to the 3 spot to take Darnold, who we thought was going to be the quote-unquote savior. I mean, look, the kid's only 21 years old. I don't think he's played great. I think his fundamentals have broken down, which gets into the coaching or lack thereof that he's received. Yep. But the problem is the lack of talent that was put around him hasn't necessarily made life any easier for him. And we see just how bad they are when he's not in the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, whether we think Joe Flacco is past it or not, you could see he's having the same difficulties. And that's anybody would have those difficulties. You could put in almost any quarterback and they would have those same difficulties.
Not to get in depth on the baseball, but I just saw the video of this, and I assume it was last night because it was a video that was just posted. Bellinger, the outfielder for the Dodgers,
last night.
In celebration after hitting a home run, dislocates his shoulder, pops it out. Now, I'm assuming because, I've watched Lethal Weapon 2 and watched Mel Gibson pop his shoulder in and out. This is not this. He may not play with that.
He went back to the dugout. He went back into the clubhouse because he talked with Scott Van Pelt after the game and popped it back in. Now, he has an issue with the labrum tear in his shoulder that forces it in and out. Now, he was able to come out and play defense. He actually caught the last out of the game in center field. Right. Now, whether or not that's going to impact his ability to hit is the unknown, but the expectation is
it will.
They'll shoot him up and he'll play if he has to. Look,
he's going to play.
The first fist bump didn't do it. It was the second Bash Brothers one with Kiki Hernandez that did it, that knocked it out. You could see right away that he was in excruciating pain after he did it because he had his arm dragging next to him as he went back to the dugout.
Yeah, this is twice in sports now. We've seen guys getting injured in celebration, in hockey, in baseball. It's like, hey, I get you're excited, but
just a point on that, because I saw a quote from Stamkos, because we talked when Stamkos was in and scored the goal that he was supposedly hurt during the celebration. He says he was hurt when he tried to make the move on whatever Dallas defenseman. He shifted, and when he did, he felt the muscle pull in his abdomen, and that was, it was only after it, obviously
But he still felt bad after the celebration. We saw that.
We saw him wince.
right.
Behind the net, we saw him wince.
Kevin, do you remember the player who hit a home run, a game-winning home run, and then he broke? It was Kendry Morales.
Yeah, that's who it was for sure.
And
His ankle.
he jumped up and broke his
He
leg.
landed wrong on home plate.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, there's been numerous athletes who have been hurt in post-game celebrations. I mean, I couldn't come up with them, but Russ knows. I mean, it happens all the time.
Yeah, there was somebody on the 86 Mets that got hurt on the mound thing afterwards. I can't remember. I think it was a reliever. So yeah, shoulders, things like that. But it still occurs, and it's always crazy.
Doug Sisk, was it Doug Sisk?
It was somebody like that, but Doug Sisk was not good enough to be on that team.
I have at least probably a half a dozen times in my career, maybe more, have had players tell me that they had trouble breathing when they were on the bottom of the pile after Stanley Cup celebrations. That it was really at some point became a little harrowing for them.
Wow.
So that because they were on the bottom and there's 16 guys on top of them and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
crazy.
Okay, let's
get started.
Ak will be joining us any minute. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, October 19th, 2020.
I'm Jan Levine.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen from HockeyBuzz.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast.
You forget who you were?
No, I did. Yeah, I did.
Oh, no, I mean Mike, too, though.
Mike
I just was phased there because I was used to saying just Kevin Allen. And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Well, Kev, it's great that we have you today because Mike Emrick, Doc Emrick, sort of shocked the hockey world today by announcing his retirement after a lengthy career. I think they said 3,700 games they projected that he has done over the years for numerous outlets. Most recently, he's been the main guy for NBC. I think it's like 13 or 14 years. And honestly, like I said on Twitter, when being in Buffalo, having the benefit of having access to Hockey Night in Canada broadcast and the U.S. broadcast, when I had the Stanley Cup final and I had the option of listening to Hockey Night in Canada, and this is nothing against Hockey Night in Canada, but listening to Hockey Night in Canada or listening to Doc Emrick, I always chose Doc Emrick. So, it's a great career, and, I've never met him in person, but I've heard he's a fantastic guy.
Yeah, I mean, I watched a World Junior game with him after one of the practices for the Winter Classic in Philly. Like, I was just sitting in the room. I wouldn't leave the park because the game was on, whether it was USA Canada, USA Russia. And all of a sudden, Emrick sits down and he starts chatting with me, asks about a few of the players, knows a few of the players. Before you know it, we're like chatting and watching a hockey game. And that's what he was like. I used to see him a lot in Philly because he would do so many games here with NBC and stuff and always greeted everybody. He was just like a nice sight at the rink. He always was positive energy. Mm-hmm. It's just, and the guy was great at his job. There's no doubt. And, I felt like a void this morning. I was like, this just doesn't feel great.
Now, Kevin, you have a book coming out tomorrow.
We do. I will tell you a little story that my heart missed a beat this morning because, obviously I joke about it with Russ, but I didn't laugh this morning. But Russ put the retirement announcement up, and I just happened to look down and I saw Mike Emrick's name. And as I've talked about before, nobody lists deaths quicker on social media than Russ. And so when I first looked at it, and I had forgotten what day it was, and I my heart just missed a beat, and I thought, oh wait a minute, that's his retirement day. So
I wrote Happy Trails. It's very rare if I'm going to.
Yeah, I didn't get that far. I just saw the name. So, but so I was just certainly elated. But I knew this was coming. I didn't know it was coming today. And obviously I was sworn to secrecy. But writing the book with Mike was such an enjoyable experience. And what I've been telling people this morning is, he had such a unique style. It was like having your high school English teacher in your living room calling hockey for you. And he was very professorial. He obviously had a PhD. NBC went back and listened to tapes and chronicled 100 different verbs he used to call a goal or a pass. He did 3,750 games, 47 years. And I just finished a story that I did for the Hockey Buzz about him. And, I ended it with a story that he told me that I really like. It was actually a comparison. Obviously, Mike and I started at least in the same era, and I had started for $180 a week at a newspaper, and he had started for $160. And he told me this great story of John Wisner, who had owned the radio station in Port Huron. And John was a shrewd negotiator, and Mike said it was like, a canary negotiating with the house cat. And so he went in there, and of course Wisner said, well, what do you need to do this job? And he said, I just blurted out $160 a week. And Wisner said, you got it. And Mike said, I knew immediately I had really shortchanged it. And he goes, then he stopped and he said, but you know what? Maybe the joke was on John, because I probably would have done that job for nothing. And I think that's still true today. Mike makes a lot of money, but, he's a very humble guy. To him, he was never the star. The game was the star of the broadcast. And he always talks about that. And I've heard him talk to, because I actually brought him one, a young broadcaster. And what he tells them is there's no rule that says you have to hate your job or that it's got to be all about the money. You should go being thankful that you are able to get into games for free and do what you love. And I don't think that ever left him right up to the very end.
It didn't. He used to say that. Dave Isaac reminded me of that. He posted it on Twitter that if you saw him at the rink and he knew you a little bit, he would always say, well, this is a great day, right? Because we're here, we're covering this, we're at the rink. And he meant it. Like, I don't know if I met anybody that's loved hockey or his job more than him.
Well, the thing that always struck me is, and this is stylistically, Jan, we always listen to the hometown announcer and how excited that they get. And even to the point where some hometown announcers like and I'm not slamming him, like Dave Mishkin, he's over the top when the Lightning score, but then when the other team score, it's like you can barely tell that the other team scored a goal. The thing I respected about the style of Doc Emrick is he was excited for both sides. It was like he was the hometown announcer for both of them, and that I love that because it was pure excitement for the game.
Well, you listened and see, if you watch them, the rise in his voice and inflection when the puck got in deep, and especially when there was a series of shots and saves. And clearly, we all know, waffle boarded, pitchforked, iron is unkind, all the Emrick bingo, I guess, for lack of a better term, that people have come up with. But what I take is two things. So SiriusXM had posted something similar to what Russ said, where he makes the comments of, that he viewed it as similar to the first time he ever got to do a game, or that, you believe that they pay us to do this. But I thought was the most interesting part, which wasn't talked about, is the thing he loved doing the most is when he got a chance to do Pittsburgh Pirates spring training baseball. That was like the panacea of everything for him. There's a guy who had a storybook career, who probably could call on any number of contacts to be able to do what he wanted. And he was thrilled just to get in to do a spring training baseball game for his hometown team. And that kind of should tell you everything that we all need to know about what Doc Emrick was like.
Well, he loves spring training baseball. I talked about it with some guys and maybe even him at one point, but he'll be at spring training this year, probably go to every game. Like he loves that.
Well, two things about that. One, and a lot of people missed it, but he did do a major league game with Bob Costas on MLB Network on July 8, 2016. And it was the Cubs and Pirates. And that was symbolic to him because the first major league game he ever saw was Cubs Pirates in 1959. He grew up in northern Indiana, which meant that he was familiar. He could catch the Chicago broadcasts, and he started out thinking he was going to be a baseball broadcaster and wrote all the broadcasters. And the other thing that a lot of people don't realize, and you can read this in the book. And by the way, this is totally a coincidence that the book release is the day after his retirement. Like that was not planned whatsoever.
Well, that's good luck for you.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But a lot of people don't realize this. But when you're, as people know, his nickname is Doc, and that's because he has a PhD and actually taught in college. But when you get your PhD, you have a formal advisor, an academic advisor, and then they ask you to get an informal advisor who's out in the working field. And he chose Ernie Harwell and Ernie Harwell was the man who guided him. And I would argue, having known Ernie Harwell as well, that they're very similar in their humility that they brought to their profession. They were both stars. Like Ernie Harwell was a mega star in Michigan. Like everybody knew him. And in the 1960s, when
we all got to finally hear Ernie Harwell like on MLB Network when they started letting the guys do it, and it was fun. And I tuned in for that because I never heard any Ernie Harwell game. Yeah,
and Ernie's down home approach, I think, was very similar to Mike's approach. And he started out the other thing. He started out with an audience of one. He took a reel-to-reel tape recorder when he was 13 or 14 up to the far reaches of Fort Wayne's Memorial Coliseum and did a broadcast of the Fort Wayne Comets. And that's how he got. Once he had been to see his first IHL game, he was then headed to become a hockey broadcaster. Baseball was no longer his game. And believe it or not, when he applied for his first job in Port Huron, he actually sent one of those tapes from him just doing it from the far reaches. So I would love to. I told him he says he has it, and he never, because I would love to hear what he sounded like when he was 14 or 15. I bet he was pretty darn good. That's one because he's, but I mean, how many people did that? But he's an incredibly genuine man, a nice man. You were talking about his spring training. He has season tickets to Pirates exhibition games, and they're right behind home plate. And he knew I was going down to do Tiger games to watch them play, and then I was going to go over to Bradenton and see Pirates Tigers. And he wasn't going to go to his games, so he sent me his tickets. And so I got to sit down there, and basically the question was, "Where's Doc?" Like, why are you there? Doc's tickets, right? So, but that's just the type of guy.
Keeping the seat warm.
yeah, exactly. So, he thinks about that, and I will never ever have a better seat than I had when I warmed Doc Emrick's seat for him. But he's a remarkable man, and I'm hopeful. That's not something I've discussed with him, but I was thinking this morning, I wonder if there's some opportunity for him to parachute in from time to time and do something. I mean, knowing NBC's relationship with Doc, I wouldn't be shocked if we'd see something, but maybe he won't want to do that. Maybe.
Well, no, actually, Kev, he put out a video, like a 5-minute video on the NBC Twitter feed, and he did say that he would be from time to time coming back with little vignettes. So, I think they wanted to allow him, somebody who is, of the status of him, allow him the freedom to come in once in a while and do that, which is great. Because
it is. I guess my question was, would he ever, come in and do an all-star game or do?
Yeah, there you go.
But I knew he was going to do some features, and he'll be great at that, obviously. So, but it's I have real mixed feelings about this. I'm happy for him because I know him, and he and his wife Joyce. And, want to take their dogs and be able to take longer trips. They like to go down to Florida in the winter. This will give them the opportunity, but, we're going to miss them. Like Canadian broadcasting networks have terrific announcers. Like, they're all good. I mean, just really, really good. But hockey in America, that belonged to Mike.
Yeah.
And so, I'm going to miss that. And I know I loved Blake Coleman's tweet where he said that he had grown up wanting to have Mike Emrick call one of his goals, and he now has Mike Emrick's last goal.
Yeah, wow. That's really great. I never even thought about that.
Yeah.
I will say this. I was pleasantly surprised, but saw like maybe for the first period of the first game that Doc had to do at his house that there was a little bit of difficulty, and then it became seamless. There was a point when he figured it all out, and it all became seamless. And then you wanted to watch every game he did again, even though you knew he's not at the rink. Like that's how good he was.
Yeah, there was about maybe like a half of a second delay, and it wasn't because of the broadcast. It was because he was waiting for the outcome of the play before he committed himself, it was somewhat of a little bit of an adjustment, but he did it fantastically.
Well, and that's a valid point by both of you, because like that's not easy to do, and the setup in his house. I mean, NBC just bent over backwards to make it as easy as they could for him, but. He had the receiver was 18 inches from his face, but it wasn't a giant, television. It was just a small screen. But I will tell you this about Mike Emrick, and I think it would surprise people, but he really is a perfectionist, and it drives him crazy by his own admission when he makes a mistake. And mistakes are inevitable in podcasting.
Yeah,
so
when you're talking that much.
Yeah, and but it just haunts him, and he talked to me about the hardest thing is to see the far wing and make the determination, and you're relying on your memories of styles and such, because sometimes you couldn't see the numbers, and he talked about how some jerseys were more difficult, and he's 74 years old, so. Hockey is not an easy game to broadcast. In baseball, you can actually look at the monitor and see the number of the guys at bat. You got
a little time.
else, and you can't do that in hockey. I mean, he can look at the monitor, but that doesn't help him.
It's fast and furious. You don't have that kind of time either, like baseball.
Yeah, it's tough when your vision is going when you're a baseball announcer, because I know listening to the Yankee broadcast, John Sterling, who's in his 80s, his vision is gone the last few years. And even when he was at the ballpark and it was going on, he was looking on the monitor and sometimes couldn't tell if the ball went out of the park or not.
Yeah, well, we saw that a lot in pandemic baseball. That happened here in Detroit, where they didn't travel. So they were watching like you were, and so they couldn't give you going, gone, right. Because they didn't know. Like they had to wait to see how the outfielder, reacted. But this will be a little bit of adjustment, I think, for Doc Emrick, who for 47 winters has been booked. One other story I would tell you, he's an incredible animal lover. And his wife being even more so, Joyce. People know about their dogs, but what they don't know is they also own horses, and not just any horses. These are rescue horses, where they've read in the newspaper that about a horse who was abandoned or everything, and they go and they rescue it. That horse is treated like no other horse you're ever going to meet.
Of course,
they make sure that everything's taken care of, and they're constantly. I went and saw Mike speak at a, it must have been 2,000 people there, and the honorarium for speaking, and they bring people in like famous newscasters and famous people, and a lot of this is a speaker series. It was $10,000, and of course he just donated his to the Humane Society of locally because of their love of animals. So he's the other thing too. It's like it's forgotten, but he didn't go to the 2002 Olympic Games because his dog was very ill and ended up dying during the Olympics after he really made what, if you read the book, you'll see was a Herculean effort to try to save that dog. So they're just great people, and I don't know anybody who ever met Mike Emrick that didn't think he was just the nicest guy in the world.
And as soon as the announcement came out, it was and they do this with everything now. It's the Mount Rushmore of hockey play-by-play guys, and I think he belongs on it. And if it was up to me, it would probably be Bob Cole and Danny Galvin. Danny
Galvin for sure, yeah.
Danny Galvin was phenomenal, and Dan Kelly.
Yeah,
I got a chance, again, being from Buffalo, one of the few benefits that Russ from being in Buffalo is I was able to hear those Hockey Night in Canada broadcasters throughout when I was a kid, and Gallivan did primarily Montreal Canadiens games, but when they got to the finals, he did well. It was the fact that the Canadiens were always in the finals, so that was the reason why.
I'll trade the 70 degrees that I'm getting this week for what you had. But anyhow,
one more story about Emrick,
nice.
And I'll send it up by saying too that I think one of the losers in this is Eddie Olczyk.
Yes,
who will be perfect with any. He's the best analyst, obviously, in America, and he'll be good with anyone. But the friendship that he and Mike have, and how well they travel together, and even though Mike was older, like they're just a really good fit. And Eddie in his foreword wrote about and I could actually relate to this as well, that Eddie, when Eddie had cancer, wherever Mike was, he would go and light candles at a church, a Catholic church in whatever city he was in and he would light as many as whatever number of chemo treatment that was. So if Eddie was on the 12th chemo treatment, Mike would light 12 candles. Well, that resonated with me because when my daughter was sick, he did the same thing. Now, here's the kicker on that story. Mike is not Catholic. So he stopped at Catholic churches and lit candles because, I'm guessing Eddie was Catholic and, I was Catholic. So, but he's not Catholic, but he went and lit candles at the Catholic church.
Wow.
So another subject that we had, Kev, was like, who's the next guy? And I'll tell you who the two choices that I came up with. One would be my choice. The other would, I think, be NBC's choice. But I like Kenny Albert. I think Kenny Albert would be a fine choice. But I think because NBC has Mike Tirico under contract, and we saw that he actually could do hockey, they might use him for a fair amount of games because hockey leads into the Olympics, and he wanted to do the Olympics.
So Richard Deitch came out and said that supposedly that Kenny Albert may be the next one in line. The guy who I would like, and others have probably said, I personally love listening to Gary Thorne do hockey. Yeah, and would love to have Gary Thorne do it because I think he also brings the passion. For those of us who have watched the broadcast, look, and I've listened to Kenny Albert obviously for years as a Ranger fan because I get the broadcast here in New York. But Thorne doing hockey was phenomenal in my opinion, and Tirico's fine.
Yes.
He just doesn't bring the same level to me as the other guys do, especially John Forsland is another guy.
Oh,
Forsland is a guy who I think could get a shot, especially given what happened in Carolina. So exactly. NBC's not lacking for candidates. No. Finding the right one, though, is going to be the challenging part.
Well, whoever follows Mike, it's a thankless job, number one. But I don't have any insight whatsoever. I don't think Mike knows, and he certainly didn't tell me if he did. But this is how I would handicap that. Albert has got so much going that if he wanted to do that, I think he'd have to give up all the other millions of things that he does.
That's true.
So I'm not sure, whether he would want to do that. And also, I wonder if he's almost too close to that because he's the backup. Like, right. I don't know. Like, he's a pro. He's a pro's pro, and he's good. So I don't know how they view all that. Forsland, that's the name I've heard. Through the grapevine, but I have no idea whether that's. I know they like him, and he does a good job. We all know that. Now he's available, but I've also heard that he likes being a team guy, and that some people think he's going to be Seattle's guy. And I've heard other teams as well. I've not heard Thorne's name though. I've seen it everywhere on Twitter today. So obviously,
he's always the sentimental choice. He
is. Yeah, for sure.
And he's doing play-by-play for the Orioles, which guarantees that he'll be done in early October since they suck.
He and Jim Palmer, though, right? And they're pretty good.
Well, the other thing that too, we got to remember that job was structured for Mike Emrick. Like at the end, he was just doing game of the week, but originally, he did a lot more games. Whoever gets that job now, the expectation may be, you're going to do a lot more games, and those guys are going to want to do it anyway because you get paid by the game,
right?
Where Mike wasn't looking to add more money, so he was just looking to make it a little bit easier on him and his bride. And imagine when in the early years when he was doing over 100 games a year, that meant that he was away from home a long time. So I think that played a role in his decision as well, is that he just wanted more time with his bride.
Yeah. All right. Moving on, Kev, if you can stay around, great. And if you have to go, that's cool.
Yeah, I can do a few more minutes. I'm going to have to run.
Okay, sounds good. What we talked about on Friday did come to fruition about 5:00 in the afternoon. The Leafs signing of Joe Thornton to a 1-year contract, and I was on the conference call with Thornton and Kyle Dubas, and it was funny, Kev. One of the reporters asked him, if he had contacted people, other teammates, and got their feedback in terms of, should I do this? Should I not do this? And he said, I did that, but I also contacted Joe Montana. Because Joe Montana is based in the San Francisco area and a legend in San Francisco, and decided to leave and go to Kansas City. And I was just struck by it. Like it's very nice that you can just have Joe Montana on speed dial and call him up and ask him his opinion on whether he should have gone to the Chiefs or not.
Yeah, but it also speaks to the way that Joe Thornton thinks about things. How many guys would have taken that consideration? But Joe's such a bright guy, and I just had the conversation this morning with somebody in the hockey world about this, and I gave them my opinion. I thought this was a great signing, just for his presence, and that person totally agreed with that. When you have younger leaders like Toronto does, to have someone like him with sage wisdom, who's been around the block, who knows how it all works, who knows what to say at the right times, and it's just good to be around. I've said before, who's more powerful than the king? It's the bishop who's whispering in the king's ear, and Thornton might be that guy. As the young leaders try to do their thing, Thornton's going to say, maybe you guys should rethink this a little bit, or
Yeah, Russ.
This is Toronto, though, Kev. This is a different animal, though. Like, I'm sure other guys that come through there, it seems like Marlowe didn't have the greatest opinion after he left. You do hit a brick wall sometimes in Toronto, even with that.
Yeah.
Well, that's
kind of stuff.
That's because they bought him out. That's because Lou Lamoriello gave him that third year when nobody else would give him that third year, and then Kyle Dubas had to clean up the mess because Marlowe wasn't a $6 million player anymore. I mean, the funny thing is that, like, Russ, I've heard over the last 72 hours. Well, I don't know where he fits. He can't be a third line center. He can't be a winger. He's not a fourth line center. I heard Mark Savard today on Sportsnet saying, well, he doesn't fit in on the first power play. And Thornton came out in his presser. Well, because they have Tavares, Marner, Matthews.
Yeah, but he might be the best passer of all of them. Who cares?
But what I'm saying is Thornton in the press conference says, whatever they want me to do, I'll do. I don't think he's going in saying I must be this or I must be that. I think he's doing this because his parents live an hour and a half away. They always wanted him to play in Toronto, and he wants to win a Stanley Cup, and he knows that he's got a better chance winning it in Toronto than he does in San Jose.
I just hope it's better for him than it was Eric Stahl in New York, because in New York, they had no idea what to do with Eric Stahl. He came in with the same kind of attitude, which was great, and they totally screwed up every bit of his presence there. I don't think the Leafs will do that, but if you keep Joe Thornton off the power play, that's just stupid. So he'll be on
maybe second power play. They're
Yeah,
saying
he won't be on the first power play.
but the second power play is fine. Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing about Stahl, though, Stahl at that point was still, a top player. Thornton was not a top player.
No, that's true.
Yeah, so I think he accepts that, and all those years of Team Canada, doing what you can to help the team as opposed to demanding, where you're gonna, get your playing minutes. I think it was perfect for training for what he'll have here. Like I don't really know what's going on, but if you told me that they have this plan where he'll play, if it's an 82 games, he'll play 3/4 of the games and fill in a bit. If he's on your third or fourth line, you're in great shape.
Right.
So.
No, that's true.
Because there's no rule other than coaches seem to follow tradition that says you got to have grind them up, players on your fourth line. And we've talked about this before. I've always thought you should get your best team from your AHL farm team and put it on your fourth line and say, go at it, boys, because you're going up against grinders and try to get some goals. I
know that there's the speed aspect, and Russ has pointed this out.
That's an issue. Yeah,
it is. But like if you put Thornton and Spezza together on the fourth line, Spezza's not slow. He was not slow last year. Now, if he takes a step back, but if you put that in the mind of another coach, okay, I have one surefire Hall of Famer and another maybe borderline Hall of Famer who still have skill on the fourth line. Am I going to put like grinders against those guys?
Yeah, you got to watch it. There's no doubt they could stretch the ice, and that's the one thing. Thornton could still stretch the ice with passes. He may not score much. He may get 5 goals or something, but he's going to get assists.
Yes,
Joe Thornton on the ice will get assists. There's no question about it. With Spezza, they could be dangerous. They'll probably put a grinder type with them, right. and that would make sense.
Yeah, right. You only played that line 8 minutes,
right?
8 or 9 minutes. That would be a really entertaining 8 or 9 minutes.
It would be.
Well, Kev, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kev. Good luck with the book.
Yeah, good luck in the book. We'll talk to
see you later. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, guys, let's touch on a few other things going on in the league right now. There has been some chatter over the weekend. Again, the Line A thing seems to be getting a lot of focus. I know Pierre LeBrun spoke to Line A's agent, and while the agent didn't say we've requested a trade, he essentially hinted at, well, it's better. I think we'd be better off if things played out where he finds a new location, because like we've said on the show here, I cannot see Kevin Cheveldayoff paying Line A after this year when his contract is up. He's making over $6 right now. I can't see them paying him what he would get on the open market or get on a new contract, which is like $9 million, which is what Mark Stone is making. From Winnipeg, since they have Wheeler and Connor and Ehlers, all wingers, making 8, 7, and 6. They're not going to pay another winger that kind of money, Russ. So no. I think the writing's on the wall here.
No, it is, and I'm sure Philly's in on it. It's funny because, again, fans are getting apoplectic because they're hearing names, and it's like, yeah, if you're getting a name like Patrick Laine, you will lose Konechny, you will lose a defenseman, you will lose a draft pick. That's what it's going to take. But again, and even if Travis Konechny was your team's leading scorer, it doesn't matter. The Flyers still need goals on the power play and just more goals in general, and that could be a good fit, especially on the power play. And so you look at that and you say, all right, you know what? Has Konechny maxed himself out? I think there's a chance of that. And so that's a guy that I think would definitely be in the trade. I'm sure it's about the defensemen and who the Flyers don't want to give up. They don't want to give up Sanheim. They don't want to give up Provorov. They don't want to give up Myers. So then, the conversation gets narrowed, and that's probably what's taking so long to see if Cheveldayoff will bite at something like that. But at some point, he's probably going to, because you're right. He's not going to pay him. And if he trades him at the deadline, let's say this isn't an 82-game season. Let's say it's a 48, 50-game season or a 65-game season. That deadline's going to come fast, and he's going to have to trade him at that deadline if he wants to get decent value for him. He can get the most value, at least now, not the most ever for what he was worth, but at least currently this is going to be the best time to trade him.
Yeah, I mean, the end of March or early April will probably be the trade deadline if the season starts, mid-January or February 1. So, I mean, you could say that, in a smaller window, a Line A at the deadline could make a bigger difference for a team than in a normal season. But I just think that any team that's going to trade for him is going to have, 20-25 million in cap space the following year to be able to re-sign him and do all the other things they need to do. And there are very few teams that are going to have that kind of cap space.
So there's a couple of things. So the longer it goes, either like usual, his value is going to rise and fall. If he's having the kind of year that he thinks he's going to have, he's going to become a much more marketable commodity.
Right.
But the problem is going to be he is an RFA. He is going to have, obviously, the team's going to look to sign him to a long-term deal. But any team acquiring him has to be willing to, I wouldn't say rip apart their infrastructure, but move some severe pieces. As you mentioned, like if Konechny and Sanheim or one of those names, moving that before the season starts and allowing Laine to get enmeshed within the team and building around them is a heck of a lot easier than trying to do that at the deadline and trying to make a potential run. So, bada bing, I see what you posted. If I'm the Jets, I'm looking at Gostisbehere and I'm going, yeah, that's nice, but he's not the defenseman I really want. I mean, Pionk ended up being a lot better than we all expected. He can play the power play. They need a guy who's much, much better in his own end, and that clearly is not what Gostisbehere is. And Morgan Frost, the jury is very far out on Frost. They're going to want a much more proven commodity in order to move a guy like Laine, who's a proven goal scorer.
Well, if they're getting a top 4 defenseman, I think they would take a chance.
Yeah, but Ghost isn't it.
Yeah, I mean, he's not.
Isn't it?
Right, he's not. No, I would say Sanheim is it. If it's Sanheim Frost in a draft pick, I think that's.
I think Sanheim is the one they would give up.
Yes.
Compared to anybody else at this point in time, and then it might not be Sanheim and Konecny. It might be Sanheim and someone slightly less proven, but yes, that would probably be the combination.
Plus, in addition, they need a guy who they know they're going to be able to project in as their 2C, because that's a glaring lack of what's on that team. They've tried to fill it several times. Although Stastny's there for a year now, you don't know whether or not they're going to bring him back
there for another year too. Yeah,
right. Which is also part of the reason why the question is whether or not Laine was actually going to be moved, because why bother going out and get Stastny to play with Laine if you're going to turn around and trade Laine?
Right.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. One thing, Mike, before you bring this up, I happen to like the signing of the Canucks with Jace Hawryluk, as long as Hawryluk decides not to be stupid and break his arm, because he does have some offensive ability. He obviously has toughness, and he's a pretty good skater. Like, he had 7 points in 11 games for Ottawa. These kinds of guys now, because of the Stanley Cup, have become popular again. Yeah. And Hawryluk has that mix, like Brendan Lemieux has that mix. And a lot more teams are going to be getting guys like this, because even though everybody looks at it and probably says, yeah, he may not make the team and is an AHL guy, if the Canucks start to get pushed around, that kind of guy gets elevated very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, he's and I'm not saying this derogatory. He's cheap muscle is what he is right now. Yeah. But if he makes an impression, he has a chance to turn that into a new contract. And there are teams out there that definitely need players who can play with physicality. So Anthony Kennard in the chat says, with the Hurricanes having $5 million in cap space and only needing to sign RFAs Vogel and Fleury, is there a goalie they can grab? Well, first of all, Vogel's probably going to be $1 million around there. Fleury probably not much more, because he's had, I think, 1 or 1.5 years of NHL experience, and he's not a big point guy. So I think that they can get them fairly cheap. But the problem is there's nobody left in the goalie market. The best goalies out there are Craig Anderson and Jimmy Howard. So unless you're talking about them trading for David Rittich or for another goaltender who has been sort of put out by their team adding a goalie, I don't see where they're getting a goal. I mean, and plus they would have to clear one of the goalies that they have right now.
Correct.
Now the thing is, if they have a restricted free agent who's arbitration eligible and they go to arbitration, then they open up a second buyout window. They could buy out Mrazek or Reimer. They could do that. But the thing is, are you going to be improving what goaltender you're going to bring in over those guys? And unless they're trading for somebody, I don't know if there's a dramatic improvement there.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Christian Fischer signing too with Arizona, because 2 years, $2 million. That is another one of those picks that was a bad pick in a bad era. Now the Chaika era for the Coyotes. Fischer, even though he was with the NTDP, used to score a lot of his goals because he was a bigger guy. He's 6'2", over 200 pounds. But as he rose up the ladder, the offense kept going away from his game, because everybody is big and strong in the NHL, and he's not the fastest guy. He's not slow, but he's not the fastest guy, and he's not the most skilled guy. And so it's a perfect signing for them, because he's low risk, but he's also low reward. Like, you're not going to get that many points out of him, and they drafted him in the second round at the time in a draft where, just to give you an example, let's see, Mitchell Stevens went right after him. I think most would say Mitchell Stevens is better. Travis Dermott went after him. I'd say most would say Travis Dermott is better. And now Sebastian Aho was the grand slam for Carolina, who went after him. So, that draft's not looking too kindly on that Fischer pick right now.
Yeah. Bardicus brings up, do you guys think the flat cap and financial situation will impact how arbitrators award contracts this year? No.
They don't care.
No, they don't.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? These guys are full-time judges that basically get these cases. It's extra money for them, And all they get is the facts about their work history and what the work is. They don't know about the league. They don't know about cap situations. You could tell by the D'Angelo one, they don't care.
Right. Now, where we'll have
a fight against D'Angelo, that just means that's the same money he'd have gotten last year or the year before.
Right. Now, where we'll have an effect is before the hearing, the agent and the team get a chance to negotiate. They'll negotiate up until the very moment of the meeting. And if you're reading the landscape, if you're a good agent, and if you're reading the landscape, if you're a general manager in this league, and you see that 90% of the cap has already been spent, and these players, you're going to come up with. I think these players are prepared to take a little less if they get a little security, and that might mean instead of taking a 1-year deal, they take a 2-year deal. But I think that's what's going to happen. It won't have an effect on the arbitrator.
No.
They will decide it purely on the facts, but it can have an effect on what both sides are willing to negotiate and accept. And I think you're going to, as usual, you probably will see 1 or 2 of these players go to the hearing, and the rest of them will be settled. Like Ilya Mikheyev, the Leafs winger, who played only 39 games because of a wrist laceration. He's arbitration eligible. His arbitration hearing is Wednesday. I would highly suggest that tomorrow or even Wednesday morning they'll reach an accord on a deal.
Like I said with the Rangers, almost nobody ever goes to arbitration against them in the Glenn Sader era. There's been like a couple of players, but it does seem like Ryan Strome has a chance because I do feel like even the Rangers don't even want to make him an offer and want to leave it completely to the arbitrator. Now, they may have given him one, but he clearly hasn't jumped at it yet. And so Ryan Strome will be the interesting one because that's one where you could say he had a career year. You could look at his other numbers. I'm pretty sure that was the best year he's ever had.
It was, by far.
Yeah, and so that doesn't mean he's going to make instantly $5 million because he got 61 points, or wherever the number was. So that's going to be the interesting one because the Rangers didn't jump at this one to sign him yet.
Well, I mean, we've discussed a couple of times, right? And it's the same theme of my column. They view him as being a product of playing with Artemi Panarin. Now, just because he played with him doesn't necessarily mean that everybody who's going to play with Panarin is going to put up tremendous amount of points we've seen elsewhere, right? So there was a certain amount of chemistry. And while you're looking at the advanced metrics in terms of, with and without playing with Panarin, you have to factor in that sometimes there are just players that click playing with each other and they can't necessarily replicate that elsewhere. Panarin is a guy you expect to do that. There's hope that Philippe Hedl could be a 2C. I don't think he's A, ready for it yet, and B, there's enough questions as to whether or not he's going to be a center or a winger on that team moving forward, especially given the issues he has in the faceoff circle because he's been replaced at times. So problem is look, the Rangers have, we said, about $7 million in cap room. They also need to sign Brendan Lemieux, which I don't think is going to be a tremendous issue based upon the kind of year that he had. They're also reluctant to give Strome a lot of money. My view is they're going to come in the 4.5 range, maybe. I think probably in the 4-ish range because I think they want to leave themselves some wiggle room. It wouldn't shock me if Strome comes in at $6 million if he does go to arbitration. But as we also said, the little nuance this year is that if an award is given and the team wants to walk away, Strome then could go back and take the Rangers offer within 4 days if he's not expecting to get more in the marketplace. And as we've seen, dollars aren't freely flowing this year, especially for forwards. No. So his viewpoint may be, I may be deserving of X amount, but if I'm in the open market and given that there's not a ton of teams that have a ton of available cap space, I'm likely not going to get it. So I may be better off just coming back for a year, accepting that figure, and then moving on next year.
Doesn't that mean, though, that the Rangers will come in with their offer a little lower than they normally would? Like, say, for example, say Strome asks for 6, like you said, and the Rangers come in at 3.5. The arbitrator awards 5 or whatever. They walk away, and then Strome has the option of either taking 3.5, and that's where the Rangers.
That's why the Rangers won't go as low as 3.5 because they know they're sending him to arbitration. And if they give him that, that's why I think Jan's right, and it'll be like 4.1-ish. And then this way, if for some reason the arbitrator feels like the Rangers gave him a good offer, then the Rangers are going to get him at their number. The other way, they don't get him even close to that number.
And it's 4.538, I think, is the number where if they go above that, they can walk away. So they're going to probably be in a figure relatively in the reasonable range of that amount because they also then have a shot at the arbitrator awarding him that amount as opposed to potentially going much higher.
Right.
All right. Quick question here from Michael, not me. Over under Lafreniere getting 55 points in his first season with the Rangers. I'll say he's going to get about 50. I'll say under, but not very far under.
I knew this wasn't you, Mike, because I had a picture of the Stanley Cup. But I'm going to go. Now, I don't want to be a jerk here, but 55 is the number I pretty much had him at. And so, like, I'm not going over or under because that's the number. It's hard to get 60 points in this league as a rookie.
So you're the guy who goes to the casino and bets on the green at the roulette table?
Yeah, because this is why. Because it's hard to get 60 points in this league as a rookie. It's not easy. And you have to get a certain amount of power play time for that. And what if the Rangers make him work for the power play time, which Quinn does seem like that kind of guy? It could take him a little while to start building up points if he's only playing even strength to start his career. So you never know how the coach is going to impact that. So I'm going even. Sorry.
So the question is also what line he's being placed on, right? So Larry wrote about this weekend. I wrote a blog. Everybody's like, automatically insert him on the first line. Well, I understand the rationale to a certain extent, but it's not as if he's going to a team that doesn't have offensive talent that's there already. And the other thing is we also know that Quinn is the kind of guy who likes to make players earn their ice time, which I don't have a problem with, right? It's right. You should not be gifted anything. You should be earning it. Granted, he gets a pass, not a pass, but he comes in with a certain amount of cachet as being the number one overall pick and what you've seen him do in the past. That, to a certain extent, goes out the window as soon as you step on the ice for training camp, because then it's a clean slate. And if he proves worthy of being on that top line, then he will be. Whether or not he's first-line power play, I'm not quite sure, because you already know you're going to have Zibanejad and Panarin there already. You're going to replace Buchnevich maybe on the power play. Kreider's going to be a nut front presence, but Lafreniere showing the ability to play a physical style also. So there's a lot in the mix. I would say in the 50-55 range seems reasonable. Going above that, I think, is going to be somewhat difficult. But if he gets thrown on the first line immediately, then I think he's got a shot at it.
Okay. Davy Jones asks, is it possible Buffalo might go after Line A by offering Ristolainen plus for him? Okay, they just signed Taylor Hall.
Yeah.
Sam Reinhart is a restricted free agent. So, you know, their defense is not particularly strong, and you're talking about trading their second best defenseman. Plus, they have Dahlin to sign after this year. The answer is no. They're not going.
Honestly, if I were Buffalo, I would try and sign Craig Anderson, because he probably does want to play another year. And you know what? He can be streaky. And with that team, if you got Anderson on a streak second half of the season with the scoring they should have, that might be enough to get him over the top. I don't know if they'll get over the top with the goaltending they have.
Well, and that's the thing.
Let me come at it the other side. If I'm Winnipeg, do I want Ristolainen for him? He's got 2 more years contract-wise. He's clearly not a defensive defenseman, which is one of the things we know that they need. Oh, and by the way, that still leaves a gaping hole on their top 6 to a certain extent that has to get filled, that I'm not sure if they're going to be able to fill right away either. So
yeah, I don't think they would do it.
If I'm Winnipeg, I'm going for the one where I can get myself a cost-contained or controllable defenseman under a little bit longer term and the possible center for Line A, rather than getting someone like Ristolainen to fill in that role.
Well, here's the thing, and I know the Sabres, they have a number of players that are arbitration eligible, and I think they're going to hearings on at least a couple of them. So they'll have that secondary window. Let's see here. Olofsson and Reinhart are both arbitration eligible. So they'll either settle beforehand or they'll go to the hearing, and that opens up the second buyout window. If they would go after a goaltender like Craig Anderson, it's probably not going to cost them any more than what Lundqvist took from Washington, which is $1 million and a half. Yep. And you can save that by buying out Carter Hutton. Carter Hutton's making $275 this year, and I just checked the buyout. It would lower his cap hit to under $1 million for this year and next year, and you'd be upgrading in goal because you'd have Anderson and Ullmark. I don't see a downside.
I mean, what if Carter Hutton, what if his vision changes again? Like, who knows?
Right. So, Funky asked, what do you guys think it would take for Tampa to trade Tyler Johnson? Would a sweetener be a first-round pick? I don't know if that's enough.
It's not enough because of the term. Look, everybody knows Tyler Johnson can still play hockey. Can he play to the level that he played at 3 years ago? No, but he can still play hockey. And it's not like he's slow, and it's not like he is a problem. His contract is the problem. And because he is a smaller guy, yeah, they're going to worry about him living out that contract. And a first-round pick's not enough anymore because you might get 3 years of a flat cap. So that means you're really risking it that by the time the end of the flat cap era ends, or if it even goes to a 4th year, you may be saddled with a player you didn't even want. So I think it's going to take more than a first-round pick.
He's 31. He's got 4 years left at $5 million per. He's had one great year. He had 3 relatively good years, but the last 2 years his numbers have not been up to snuff. And I don't think he profiles as a 2C anymore. He's probably a 3C.
Right.
You're not paying a 3C $5 million a year now. Now, if Tampa ate half the contract or part of the contract, you may have a better shot. But remember, I think Brisbois already tried this route originally before they moved him, and clearly he couldn't find a taker. So if they're going to move him, they're going to have to up the offer in order to be able to try to be able to deal him, to be able to salvage more than $1 million off the cap by sending him down to the minors.
Yeah, that defeats the purpose of trading them because they want to clear the full $5 million to be able to, yeah. So
they don't have a first rounder anyway because they ended up dealing it for Coleman last year, and they also dealt another first rounder also in another trade. So they're a little
even what they're saying in the chat room. You're not going to get Tyler Myers to bury him in the minors simply because A, that's kind of a dick move, but B, also, it's not going to save you what you think it's going to save you. It's not saving you enough money.
Right. Remember, when you send somebody to the minors, you don't clear the full contract. Right. You clear a little over $1 million. So,
yep. $1,075,000 is basically what you clear.
It's not worth it.
Right. So, they waived him. If they put him down in Syracuse, then he's still a little under a $4 million cap hit. It really doesn't, and the problem here is not the AAV, it's the term. The term is the killer here.
Yeah. Well, I think both hurt because in the flat cap.
Right.
I mean, look, what they need to really figure out is, okay, what is Sergachev going to cost me? How much? And then also with my other RFAs, how much money do I really need to clear to give myself a wee bit of cushion just in case, and then try to work around contracts that way by maybe dealing prospects or a pick. Yep. But again, I'm assuming Brisbois has already tried that and hasn't had much luck.
And if you think of buyout with Johnson, it would be an 8-year spread, and for the first 3 years, the cap hit would be $2.7 million. So you're only saving a little over $2 million in those years. And they need, and this is where somebody brought up Tampa. This is where and I know that Brisbois is sort of keeping his powder dry here, but I think he's made a mistake because with everybody eating up all their cap space, nobody is going to take on Johnson, and maybe he can sweeten the pot to get somebody to take Killorn or Palat, but I don't think they want to trade Killorn or Palat.
No, they don't want it yet. I mean, look, like Funky brings up is it a good time to offer sheet? Sure. I mean, I think you can offer sheet Cirelli, but again, he's the kind of player that you don't want to overpay for either, because then you could be in a Tyler Johnson situation down the line with Cirelli. And so that's the danger of doing that.
Different styles of play, and also he's a lot younger, Cirelli.
And
again, you're going to sign him to like a max deal now, and he's still not the biggest guy, and you still don't know what punishment he's going to take down the line.
Right, but if you do over $4 million a year, in terms of what the remuneration is going to be, Tampa can't match that right now. They got under $3 million in cap room, and they
at this moment, we don't know what.
Remember, you kind of force their hand a little bit though by signing an offer because there's a limited period of time before they can do anything.
Yeah, and you have to figure here that there has been talk about Stamkos. We heard some over the weekend about him being asked to waive his no move clause. But what I'm wondering here is, he re-injured himself in the Stanley Cup final. Does he start the season on LTIR? And is that the way?
Yeah, he probably will.
We talked about that, right? So it's 10 games basically that you have to miss, 3 weeks or 10 games. That all that does though is that buys you time for another move, because once he's ready to come back, you need to have the cap space to be able to put him in. Now, granted, for all we know, Stamkos could miss a majority of the year given the fact of his injury. And look, if he needs surgery again, the question is, twofold. One, what's the recovery time? But more important, when are you actually starting the season, right? So let's say you had a surgery now. It's a 4-month recovery period. We don't start the season until late January. You basically lose a substantive period of time. It's 3 months. You only have a month really to stick him on LTIR before he's ready to come back.
Whereas if he waits to have the surgery until, say, December, and it's a 4 to 5 month recovery, then he comes back when the playoffs start, and it doesn't count against the cap at all.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, he could pull a Forsberg here.
Yep. One further thing here before we end the show. Eck is in his blog referring to Connor Brown, who is having an arbitration hearing on October 22nd, and he's hearing some rumors regarding interest in Connor Brown from teams like Nashville, LA, Vancouver, Florida. My experience with Connor Brown being with the Leafs, I think he's an excellent two-way player. He was that guy who Babcock used as a sort of a jack of all trades, which I thought was a disservice to him, because I think he was good enough to play a set position and be a top 6 or at least a top 9 winger. In Ottawa, he got that opportunity. He was only behind Brady Tkachuk in scoring. I don't think he's going to get overpaid in arbitration, and I don't think that they're so tight against it unless Melnick just doesn't want to pay on a long-term deal for Connor Brown. But it's only a 1-year deal if it's arbitration, so I'm a little skeptical of that. But maybe they want to move out a pricey contract if that happens, Russ.
Maybe. I don't know. I think this one will go to arbitration, though.
Yeah, he's only 20. I think he's 25 years old, and he's a good team guy.
He is a pretty good skater. He's pretty good at everything, and he has a decent skill level. He does. The
Leafs did not want to trade Connor Brown.
No,
they were just like this year. They were forced into trading Kapanen and Janssen for cap space reasons. They had to trade Connor Brown because he was making over $2 million, and they really didn't have the room. I think the Leafs, in a perfect world, would like to have him back, but I just don't think they can afford him. So, all right, good show, guys.
Oh, wait, one more thing. So CBC just put up that that Bettman is saying that the league hopes to begin January 1st, wants to play a full season with fans and arenas, but the border between Canada and the U.S. remains closed. As this thing keeps changing, the one thing that it seems like the league is relying on is like a vaccine happening, because that's the only way they're getting full arenas. So it does seem like that's what they're banking on. I don't know what you guys feel, but I don't think they're going to get a full season in, but that's what it seems like they're banking on.
Well, I can't see them getting a full season starting January 1st unless we're talking, okay. So even if they switch to a Canadian division and divisions that are close together, like say Boston, the New York teams, Philly, Pittsburgh, and Washington in one division. The Canadian division, you're talking about flying cross country 4 times to play Vancouver and Calgary and Edmonton and Winnipeg. It's not feasible. I mean, I don't think that they can play a Canadian division, and I don't think they can play an 82-game schedule unless the border is open and unless what would
capacity be? 25%, Mike? Capacity? What would capacity?
Melnick basically said he's not starting the season unless they have at least 6,000 people in the building, and then made a joke about that would be more they normally have. But yeah, I think they have to at least partially have people in these buildings. Otherwise, I mean, Pagula does not want to open up the season unless there are fans in the stands.
I think if you're going to start January 1, you're opening out without fans in the stands. I don't think there's any way, shape, or form. Now, granted, they're doing it in the NFL. To a certain extent, I think
certain states,
right, only certain locations. I think hockey arenas is going to be a lot more difficult than a football stadium where everything is outdoors to do it in terms of maintaining your social distance. If the league was willing to start that way, where you play in arenas and have no fans there, and then slowly potentially incorporate fans, maybe if the viewpoint is we want to start with fans, I think they're going to have no choice but to delay. But also, look. The issue with the vaccine is everybody going to be willing to take it as soon as it comes out? The guesstimate, and rightfully so, is likely no. So banking on the fact that it's going to be A, available broad-based, and B, everybody broad-based is going to take it, I think is a fallacy.
Yeah, and if you listen to the governor and lieutenant governor of New York, they're basically warning against anybody taking the vaccine. So they're acting like anti-vaxxers. But I'll tell you this: today the Canadian government pushed the date to November 21st in terms of the border. I think we've all said this on the show, and I'll say it again. Depending on what the election results are in early November, I'm skeptical if it's a certain party that they won't stop pushing it forward. Because if it's a Biden president, then I think that you'll see the border probably open. Because right now it's blowing up in Ontario and Quebec.
That's true, and I can't say it's not political that way, because that would be wrong, because I do kind of feel like it's sort of like getting volleyed around that way now.
Yeah. So, okay. We will be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast for the departed Kevin Allen, for Jan Levine, and for Russ Cohen. I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching the Hockey Buzzcast. And remember, without the buzz,